So, as you all know, OpenAI has raised something like $100 billion. ChatGPT is the most funded, most hyped AI product in human history. Yet today it lost to a dice problem that a free model solved perfectly. Here's the setup. Peter has 9 dice, but small ones, with 4 sides each. Colin has 6 dice, the normal 6-sided kind. They both roll everything, add it up, and the highest total wins. Simple question, right? What's the chance Peter wins? This is Project Euler Problem 205, and like always, I handed it to the same 4 models: ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, and Claude. 3 of them got the exact answer, but the most expensive one in the room did not. And the reason why is actually kind of fascinating. So, before we get into who failed, let's understand what the problem is actually asking, because there's a trap in it. Peter rolls 9 4-sided dice. The lowest he can roll is 9, all ones. And the highest he can roll is 36, which is all fours. So his total always sits between 9 and 36. Colin rolls six sided dice, which means his lowest is 6 and his highest is also 36. So they can both hit 36 at the top, but Colin can dip way lower than Peter ever can. Now here's where people slip. If you just compare averages, Peter's 9 small dice average to 22.5 and Colin's 6 dice average is 21. Peter's is higher, so you think Peter wins and move on, right? But averages don't decide a single matchup. What actually matters is across every possible way both sets of dice can land, how often is Peter's total higher than Colin's? Colin's totals are far more spread out, and that spread changes the whole picture. So the real answer isn't a gut feeling, it's an exact fraction. One of every possible combination. What share of them does Peter win? And the key word here is exact, because that's the word that tripped up the most expensive AI model. So the cleanest solution this time came from Gemini, and it's genuinely elegant. Gemini realized that you don't need to list out every single dice combination, you just need to know how likely each total is. So it built the distribution using convolution, which sounds crazy, technical, but the idea is really intuitive. You start with one die where every face is equally likely. To add a second die, you combine that with the other die's outcomes, and the total spreads out into a little bell-like shape. Add a third, it spreads more. Gemini did this 9 times for Peter and 6 times for Colin, each step building directly on the last. So instead of ever touching the hundreds of thousands of raw combinations, Gemini ended up with 2 compact tables for every possible total and exactly how many ways it can happen. Then it compared them. For each total Peter could roll, it counted all the ways Colin rolled something lower and added it all up. The result exactly 0.573141. So Peter wins about 57% of the time, and the 9 small die really do beat the 6 big ones. And Gemini got it perfectly with the least work out of anyone. That efficiency is why it takes the crown this round. So Grok got the exact same correct answer, just with a more brute force, no nonsense approach. Grok didn't bother with anything clever. It said Peter has 9 4-sided dice. That's 4 to the ninth of around 260,000 possible outcomes. Colin has 6 6-sided dice, which is 6 to the sixth, about 46,000 outcomes, and those numbers are totally manageable for a computer, so why not just count them all out? So it generated every possible total for both players, tallied out how many ways each total can occur, and then compared the two directly. For every total Peter could get, it summed up all the ways Colin lands lower and divided by the total number of matchups, which ended up on 0.573141. Exactly right, the same as Gemini. The only reason Grok sits just behind is that it did more work to get there. So Claude also got it exactly right, which is worth saying clearly. Claude did not fall for this one, it just took the most laborious path to the correct answer. Claude's logic was sound. It understood that this is more about counting outcomes, not comparing averages, which is already the insight that the expensive model missed. So it built out Peter's distribution of totals, then for Colin, and then compared them to find how often Peter wins. The difference is in just how heavy the method was. While Gemini built the distributions efficiently with convolution, Claude leaned on a harder, full enumeration method, grinding through the combinations more directly. It's a bit slower and does more work than it strictly needs to, but this is the important part. It arrives exactly at the correct answer every single time. So Claude lands in at a solid third, not because it was wrong, it wasn't, but because the other two models reached the exact same answer with cleaner, lighter methods. So this is the one everyone's here for, ChatGPT, the most funded AI on the planet, and it's the only model that did not get the correct answer. So here's what it did. Instead of counting the outcomes, ChatGPT decided to simulate the game. It wrote a loop that rolls Peter's 9 dices and Colin's 6 dice, checks and then checks who won. repeats that 2 million times, and then looks at the ratio. This is called a Monte Carlo simulation. And I want to be fair, this is not a stupid technique. Simulation is generally powerful, and it's used all over finance and physics for problems that are too massive to count directly. So in a vacuum, it's a reasonable instinct. But that's exactly the problem. The problem is not too massive to count, it's tiny. The three other models counted exactly every single outcome in a fraction of a second. ChatGPT reached for the heavy approximate tool when the precise simple one was right there. So the approximation has a cost. ChatGPT reported 0.5728345, where the exact answer is slightly lower at 0.5731441. So it's off, starting at the fourth decimal place and worse. If you run the simulation again with a different random seed, you'd get a slightly different number. Project Euler demands one exact answer, and a simulation fundamentally cannot guarantee that. So the most expensive, the most hyped model in the world brought a sledgehammer to a problem that needed a pencil, and it's the only one that walked away without the right answer. So let's line all four up. Gemini built the distributions with the convolution and got 0.5731441, which is exactly right with the least work. Therefore, Gemini is the winner. Grok counted every outcome by brute force and also got the correct answer, just by a heavier method. Claude also got there through the most laborious route of the three. And ChatGPT simulated 2 million games and got a close answer, but not the exact answer. The only model that missed the precise one. So three models that got the exact answer and one approximation. The one that was the approximation and the wrong answer is actually the one with $100 billion behind it. So the winner this time is Gemini, and it earned it with the cleanest solution in the room. Gemini recognized that you never need to brute force this. You just build the probability distributions directly with convolution and then compare them. Least work with an exact answer. When you construct the answer instead of grinding for it, that's the mark of really understanding the problem, and Gemini did. Grok comes in second and it's close. Same exact answer, just by powering through every outcome instead of being clever about it. Claude lands third, and I want to be clear, third is not a failure. Claude got the right answer. It just took the heaviest path to get there. And then ChatGPT, the most expensive model in the world and the only one that didn't get the exact answer. Not because it's incapable, but because it reached for simulation and an approximation tool rather than a specific brute force method for a smaller problem like this. That's the lesson here. More money, more hype doesn't mean better judgment. Sometimes the right move is the simple one, and the cheaper model saw that while the expensive one overshot. So the answer for Project Euler 205 is that Peter wins with a probability of 0.5731441. The 9 small dice beat the 6 big dice. The most people's gut is wrong, and this time the $100 billion model got beaten by the free ones. Same for next time, different problem.